Hi, this is Raj from Sportscars. In this video I'm going to be talking about the Boxster models throughout the eras because I'm very fortunate enough to have 3 different eras of Boxster in at the same time. So I'm going to talk through the physical differences, how they perform, and also go through the specifications as well so you can sort of see for yourself which one maybe would suit you better than the others, and obviously I would encourage you to go out and try them yourself. First of all, I've got the 987 Gen 2, so these were made from 2009 to 2012-ish. Then I've got the 981, so this is the next series on, and this is these were predominantly produced between 2012 and 2015. And then I've got the 718 Boxster, which was produced from 2016 up until roughly current date, so 2025. And all 3 are fantastic cars in their own right. I'm not trying to say that one is massively better than the other. They just have different quirks, different things that are advantageous to specific use cases. So the first thing is the 987 Gen 2 was sort of coming to the end of that particular era of design and build. The 981s and 718s were the next on. Basically the 718 is a facelift of the 981 but with different engines and various other bits of technology. The 987 Gen 2 represents the pinnacle of the previous generation, so this is the last era with hydraulic steering. It is the last era with that sort of slightly smaller body because they did make the body a little bit bigger in terms of width and length. They changed the wheelbase as well, so these do feel a little bit more pointy behind the steering wheel and a little bit more feedback through the steering as well. It's not to say that the electric steering is terrible, because it really isn't. It is sensational compared to most other more modern cars. Likewise the brakes and everything, so don't discount one of these because you say the steering's terrible, because it really isn't. So the 987 Gen 2 has a couple of differences from the other 2. One is that the hood can't be operated with the key remotely, whereas the other 2 you can. So to operate the hood on this era of Boxster, you have to put the key in the ignition. That's without having a modification done, that is. I think some have a modification done. That means that they can do it. So you have a release hook at the front, which you have to disengage, and that drops the windows as well. And then you have controls here, which then lift up the roof. And that final stage was those windows going up back to their original position. And then you've got a really nice open cockpit. You've got a wind deflector there, which is actually clear. Then you've got these little sort of honeycomb around the roll bars, which also help through it. And it's a very comfortable place to be, even at speed with the roof down, because you don't get buffeting through the cabin as you would expect. It's been properly designed to be driven as an open top car. All of these are obviously rear wheel drive mid-engine, so all of them have the engine. In this area here, it's a flat. In all of these cases, it's a flat engine, but these 2 are flat 6s. This is a flat 4, the 718, so I'll go through those differences when I've got the folders to run through as well with the aid of those. And then they have the hoods on top, and then they all have a front and rear boot, so they're very, very practical. But let me just open up the roof of this one. So with this one, you can actually open up the roof with the key. You just in the UK anyway, so you hold the unlock button, and it'll do the same thing. Drop the windows. It doesn't have like a cowl which lifts to make room. It just literally has enough space there to sit within its own footprint. So it's a little bit less complex, I'd say, in some ways. It does have these little sections here which lift it up to make room for the arms of the hood. So Very good system. These two have actually both got similar seats, so the sport seats plus. Actually, all three. No, these two have sport seats plus. The other one has sport seats. So it doesn't have the hardback sport seats in the 718. But yeah, as you can see, there's a big update in the cabin. So this era, 987 Gen 2 had a touchscreen sat nav, which was a hard drive based system, so you could have full sat nav for UK and Europe in our region's case. You could have air conditioning or climate control. This has just got the air conditioning, so you have to manually adjust fans and temperature and where you want it to go. They all have the 7-speed PDK, so that hasn't changed between them. This one's got the sport design steering wheel, so that's the one with the larger paddles up on this side, down on that side when you pull them towards you, so very intuitive. And it's got things like cruise control as well, and Bose, which is an extra subwoofer in that area there in this case. So rather than having a storage compartment here, you've got a big subwoofer with additional speakers in the corners there. And then going to the more modern 981, you've got a more contoured dash. Again, you've got hard drive sat nav, but you haven't got CarPlay yet. Neither of these have got CarPlay unless you put a modification in them. It's got the same sport design steering wheel. It has got Bose, but it's not located here. It's actually the subwoofer is actually located in the dash underneath in the footwells, so it doesn't actually interfere with anything that you see. There was obviously the option for folding mirrors as well, so you couldn't have that option on the earlier cars. So if that's an issue for you, then it's something worth bearing in mind, is that these, if you park on the street, you can't really do what this does. There was not an option, but you can temporarily. They say don't do this all the time because it will stretch the springs, but you can leave them at that angle, so it does tuck them in within the body there. But it's not really a solution in the same way that the 981 has. So if I open this up, so it'll fold those open. And this one has also just got the air conditioning rather than climate control. And as you can see, the shape of the seats is a little bit wider. So there's got more room in the cabin as well. It just feels a bit wider as well. But actually what's happened is that mirror to mirror, and I will go through this with the cars. Actually, let me show you these as well. So the keys are also different, and they changed in this era between 987 Gen 2 and 981. So you have, that's the 981 key, that's the 987 Gen 2, that's the 718. So the keys are identical for the later cars, and you can get different coloured key cases, which we do, and sometimes they are ordered from the factory like that. So that silver one is for the 981. This one is for this one here, this beautiful 718. And then the 987 Boxster, you just get a locking and unlocking as one button, front boot, rear boot, whereas here you get lock and unlock separately, then the boot separately as well. So let me show you the difference in boot size actually. So let's look at the rear first. So you hold it down. Let's open them both up. So size-wise, they're about the same. I'd say there's a little bit more room actually in the 987 Gen 2 compared to the 981. And then if I look at actually the 718, I think the 718 one will be identical to the 981. Yeah, it's identical to the 981. This one's got a little boot protector in it. And then front boots. So this is 718, again a boot protector in there. That's optional on all of the 981s and onwards from the factory. You've got, it goes all the way to the floor pan, Lots of space, tools down the sides, and then the warning triangle there. And I'll show you the 981. Exactly the same setup as you've just seen in the 718. So tools, warning triangle, and the same size lower section. I don't think they've changed the dimensions of that. Then let's go to the 987. This one feels a bit smaller, and all the tools are tucked in that section there. So you pull this forward, then you've got your tools there. So they all come with the same tools, lock and wheel bolt, set of Porsche tools, towing eye, tyre compressor. The tyre compressor in the 981s is actually in this area here. You lift that centre section up, and tyre gel as well, and then the warning triangle on this section. But you do have a little extra storage here. That's the wind deflector cover if you want to take that off. And then you've got some storage in there as well. Let me just shut these two. So they all have a spoiler that comes up, but they change the design of the car. So this one comes up as like a solid wall almost. So that's like a solid windbreak just there. Whereas these two have more like a traditional spoiler, I guess, with arms. So that one comes up like that. Which I think is more aesthetically pleasing when it's up. I prefer them all actually I think they look best when they're down, but if it is up, I think the later cars, it looks better, just more aesthetically pleasing. This one looks sensational even down because it is more of a pronounced sort of ducktail, which is a really nice feature they put in it, but it has the same functionality with two arms. It doesn't go up as high because it doesn't need to. It's got this more aggressive sort of rise to it, as you can see. So it's got the similar kind of arms, but it doesn't come up in the same pronounced way. And then going back to the interiors, so this has got the standard what's called sport seats, so no hardbacks on them, but you could spec things like red belts and things to match this lovely red roof. That's why we got this one, predominantly because of that beautiful red roof. This one hasn't been specced with folding mirrors, but they are what I think they're called the sport design mirrors on the earlier 981s. So they have a gap there that goes through the arm to the door. Uprated steering wheel. So this is the what's called the multi-function steering wheel, because it's got all the controls here, but it has got those larger paddles that you see on the sport design one on the other two, and then it's got a mode switch there. So rather than having sport and sport plus and things on in that area there, it's all, or that area there actually on the 981. So they split out the engine modes with the suspension. So the switchable suspension is there, switchable exhaust is there, but the actual sport and sport plus, you also get individual. That allows you to tailor exactly what you want, and if you press the button in, it gives you basically full power, well, full responsiveness, not more power, full responsiveness for 20 seconds for overtaking as well. So it brings it on quite a bit in terms of its dynamic range. This one has got climate control, which the 981 and the 987 could have had, so you get actual separate temperatures, and you can leave it on auto and it will direct the fans exactly where you want them to. All three have got the optional heated seats. Believe it or not, that wasn't standard in the UK. I think it should have been, in all honesty. And then this one's got Sport Chrono Package Plus, so it's got the dashboard dial on there, just like the 987 Gen 2 has as well. So there's the dial in the 987 Gen 2, and the 981 doesn't have one, so it just has the hazard lights and the unlock button. and no stopwatch in that area there. Rollover bars. Let me open the roof up of this one here. So it's exactly the same mechanism as the 981. Rollover bars are the same on the 981 as they are the 718. They didn't change. All of these bits that spent millions of pounds developing basically haven't changed since 2012 because they are so good at having those bits. And then in terms of the sat nav and things, so this car has the first time when they released these in 2016, they had the wired CarPlay. So this is PCM 4. So it has CarPlay, so it has connectivity with your phone when you plug it in, not wireless, but you can again get a mod to make it wireless. It has DAB radio, whereas it was an option on the 981, and it wasn't an option on 987 Gen 2. In fact, someone has retrofitted what's called a pure radio, digital radio into this car, 987. Nowadays, you wouldn't bother doing that. You would actually just put in a CarPlay motherboard into the head unit, or just get a whole aftermarket head unit and do it that way, rather than having just the digital system for the radio in there in the UK. But the architecture's largely the same between this 718 and the 981. They changed the vent designs, the top of the dash. The lower part of the dash is exactly the same, as is this section here. The PCM is obviously a different unit, so that looks very different there because it's got less of a border on the screen. Steering wheels are different, so that brings up the look of the interior quite a lot and you can actually retrofit those steering wheels into the 981s and even 987s, but you need aftermarket adapters to make them work, to talk correctly. Then in terms of the styling, so let's start with the 987. So these cars, as standard, came with halogen lights, and this has got halogen lights, and you can tell it's got halogen lights without looking at the spec because it doesn't have headlight washers. This era, if you had xenon lights, you had to have headlight washers. 2014 onwards, the rules changed in the UK where it was optional to have that. So this car has got halogen lights. It's got daylight running light. All of them have daylight running lights. In this case, they're in that section there. There was no option for front parking sensors. And then in the 981s, they made xenons standard, and you would tell by the headlight washers there. But there was the option on all of the eras for directional headlights, so cornering headlights. This one has got the directional headlights and also the xenon system, as I said. 2014 onwards, some of them didn't have the headlight washers because, as I said, it wasn't a legal requirement anymore in the UK. So you might find a 2015 with xenons but no headlight washers. Then the lower part of the bonnet, lower part of the spoiler was reshaped, and a lot of them have the full parking system, so you have front and rear parking sensors. These vanes are typically not painted. They're normally a satin finish like these, but on this car they've been painted, which I think makes it look really nice. And again, daylight running lights in this section here. And then the 718s, they resculpted the front, so they put different wings, actually, different shape headlights. But these in this case are LEDs and they're directional. It's got the headlight washers as well, daylight running lights in that section there, and they made it, I think, look more aggressive, with this lower section being more like something you'd see on an aero kit car. So an aero kit equipped 718 would have just like a GTS, a more sculpted front end. I think they made that more standard, and then the aero kit of this looks even more aggressive with certain areas of that in black. And again, parking sensors on this one as well, front and rear. And then going to the back is actually quite, let me put these spoilers down quickly. So you can see the vents here are round. On this one, they're almost like square, interestingly, and then they go back to having sort of like an ovally shape in the 718. Just putting down those two spoilers quickly. Auto lights were also as standard in the UK on 981 onwards. If you have a 987 Gen 2, there was never an option for auto lights, just like there wasn't an option for folding mirrors. But going back to the back end, so it's a nice round back end. With the Rise 987 Gen 2, they put in these extra sort of design vanes, like a diffuser on both sides. The larger 3.4S, which is this car here, came with the twin exhaust setup in the centre. This is a 2.7, so it has the oval setup just like a 981 would have, 987 Gen 2 would have if it was the 2.9. Parking sensors are hidden in this bit, again like a diffuser at the bottom there. Different style lights obviously, so these are LEDs. 987 Gen 2's introduced LED rear lights, and they continued that with the 981s as well. So I think they're a lovely shape, lovely colour as well, especially with this platinum silver. It's a lovely contrast. This is basalt black, and then obviously the red, standard red tail lights. And then the 718, they made them much more like a 3D design, clear perspex then with the lights actually enclosed within them. Then they had this black section here with Porsche on it, in a much more aggressive lower section there with the twin exhaust. This is the S model, but interestingly, these three cars, the oldest car has the biggest engine. So this is an S model, so it's a 3.4 litre flat six. This 981 is the base model, so it's the one below the S, and that has a 2.7, so it's gone down by 0.7 litres. And then this is the top spec S model. So this has, they moved to a flat 4 turbocharged engine, so this has a 2.5 litre turbo, but yet this one has more power and more torque obviously because of that turbocharging, and we'll go into what difference that makes in terms of performance and power, torque, that kind of thing on all three with the specs I've got on the table there. But that's the estate. Oh, actually, let me talk about wheels. So the biggest size you could get on the 987 era was 19-inch, and these are 19-inch, and they're called the Turbo 2, which are diamond cut with agate grey metallic sides of the spokes, this centre section, and also the barrels. The S models also have the bigger brake setup, which is normally denoted by having guards red calipers with the Porsche inscription on. So that's a bigger brake setup than even this 981, which has the base model setup, which is slightly smaller discs and pads, and also they're normally satin black calipers with, again, Porsche inscription on there. But the largest wheels you could get on these were 20s. These are actually 19s, which actually ride really well, but the 20s also ride very well as well. 718s, the largest size you could again get was the 20 inches, and these are actually a carryover from the previous generation 981s. You could get these, what are called 20-inch Sport Classic wheels on your 981 as well, and I think they look very good. They suit the car, they suit the 981 era as well, but they're diamond cut again with agate grey metallic. And then this has got the larger brake setup as well, being an S, which look even bigger than the 987 Gen 2S brake setup, much bigger calipers compared to this one here. But I mean, they all have, as I said, their own individual benefits. So very briefly, this is the last one with hydraulic steering, naturally aspirated flat six. This introduced electric steering, electric assisted steering, with still a naturally aspirated engine. Actually, they carried over, if you had an S of this one and an S of this one, it would basically have the same engine, same gearbox with a few tweaks, a few changes that they advanced on between them, but basically they were the same. This happens to be the smaller engine, so it's a 2.7 flat six normally aspirated. And then the 718's completely new engines altogether, all flat fours, apart from when they introduced later on in production the GTS 4 litre, which had a standalone 4-litre flat 6 normally aspirated. So this has got all the modern tech, the most on paper performance, but it doesn't have that lovely flat 6 thrum that these two have. And this is the purest form with the hydraulic steering. So you've got the whole range. Obviously the technology's been updated in this to be more usable, it's a more comfortable place to be for more, if you were commuting every day or if you're going on long distances, this is probably the best naturally aspirated. And then if you want all the modern tech, use it every day, then I would say the 718 is the best. But if you want a pure weekend sports car, then actually I'd say the 987 is the best. So all three have their own place. It just depends what your use case is. So let me put all those keys down and go through some of the specs. So the big changes are, I mean, the width of all three is the same, and that's because it's mirror to mirror. So even though the 981, 718 are wider in terms of their body, mirror to mirror, they're exactly the same as the 987 because these mirrors are actually quite a bit wider compared to these ones, so that's how they've cheated. So it can still fit in the same garage, which is what I guess that's the German way, is to make the cars fit in the same garage, so that someone who's been buying Boxsters all their life doesn't suddenly find that the latest one doesn't fit in the same garage, that all the others have fit up until that point. However, even though it can fit mirror to mirror, opening the doors is much more difficult because you haven't got the narrower body, the narrower doors to open them. So it's just something to bear in mind. Even though the measurement is the same, it's got different practicality consequences. The length is roughly about the same. It's about 30 centimeters longer, the newer cars. Yeah, so 4342 versus 4374 and then 4379. So it's half a centimeter longer, this 718 compared to the 981, but both are only about 3 centimeters longer than this. So it's not a huge difference in that sense either. Height-wise, they're all the same. Height-wise, they're all about the same. So 1280 for the 718, 1282 and 1294. So this is actually slightly taller with the roof up. It does have sort of more of a bubbly shape compared to the slightly more contoured roof of the later cars. I've already been through wheels and that kind of stuff. The engines have also been through as well. So flat 6, flat 4, normally aspirated turbo. So this is 987, this is 981, this is 718. That's how I've laid them out. So it's hopefully easier to follow. 2011 versus 2013 versus 2019, all have 7 speeds. Then power-wise, so we've got here 310 horsepower at 7,200, 266 foot-pounds of torque. For the S, then for the non-S, 981, 265, so that's down 55 horsepower. No, 45 horsepower. And then torque is down about 50, 60 foot-pounds. And then 4750, 4.5 is where that's at. And then if you look at this one, this is the big difference. So the horsepower is 35 more than the 987 Gen 2, but it's the torque that's the big increase, I'd say. So 288 to 310, but it's this figure here. It's all the way down at 1950 RPM. So that means this one is a lot more responsive lower down. These ones you have to rev more. And that isn't necessarily a disadvantage of these cars. In my opinion, the 2.7 is actually the most oral in terms of you actually get to use more of the rev range to get the power, to accelerate up to motorway speed or national speed limit 60 miles an hour. You actually get to hear more of the rev range than even this 3.4S because you have to use, and that's where the sound really sounds amazing. This car, it doesn't sound super great at the higher revs, so you actually don't use as much of the engine and the rev range. So it's a bit of a tricky one. In terms of responsiveness and actually getting down the road efficiently, this is the best. But in terms of the enjoyment factor, in terms of hearing the soundtrack, I would say the 2.7 is the best. This one is a bit of both in terms of you'd still do rev it, but you'd have to be going quite a bit faster than in a 2.7 to enjoy it. And they can perfectly handle that. So you would argue that actually, if you're a purist who loves going as fast as possible and hearing the sound, then the 987 Gen 2 might be for you. And then weight-wise, that's the and performance. Actually, let's go through performance. So 0 to 60 in about 4.9 for the 987S, 0 to 60 in 5.6 for the lower-powered 981, and then this one is just on another level. So 4.2 seconds to 60 with that turbocharged engine, 177 top speed. Not that you're ever going to go 177, 163 on the 981, 169. So the big difference is in the acceleration, I'd say. But again, as I said, it's not about going as fast as possible. It's about how you get there. And then weight, 1,355 for the 987, so 1.3.5 tons, 1.34 tons, so very similar, 15 kilos different. And then again, 1,355. So basically, even though this one is massively advanced in terms of its tech and everything else, slightly bigger, it's the same weight in theory as a 987 Gen 2, and this one would be about the same as well. Obviously, this is dependent on spec, because if you spec up the full 18-way adaptive hardback sports seats, you've got Bose or Burmeister, you've got all of the heated seats, the full climate control, everything like that. That adds weight to the car. So these are just sort of the manufacturing weights based on a base like option car. So if broadly they're all the same weight, but obviously if you've got different options on them, then they're going to have different weights. And that is all of the spec side as well. But I would, as I said, encourage you to drive. Obviously then there's a price difference as well. So these start for a decent S, I'd say sort of low 20s up to around 30 for a really low mileage coveted car with an amazing spec. 981, and if it was a non-S, it would start from about sort of 15 plus for a 987 Gen 2. These 2.7s start from around, I would say, low 20s and go up to around 30. And then the S's go from a sort of like 25 to 35 roughly. And then these 718s, the base models probably start around mid 30s now, maybe low 30s. Then the S models with all the options like this one could be sort of like this one's, I think I've got it up for around 46. And obviously the earlier cars would be slightly cheaper. So 2016 base model would be a lot cheaper, but you obviously have the overlap between the different models in terms of, and basically like a decent S of a 987 could be roughly the same price as a base model 981, and then an S model 981 could be roughly the same as a base model 718. So you do have that overlap. So if you have a particular budget, go out and try maybe two of the different eras to see what you gel with the most. And that's, I think, where I'm going to leave this video. If you do have any questions about these fantastic open top, mid-engined, rear-wheel drive sports cars that Porsche make, because they really are the ultimate, I would say. Other makes make two-seater open top sports cars, but I think the Boxster has sort of shown all the others how to do it and sort of elevated the whole space. And nothing can really come close to how these feel, how you feel behind the wheel, but also the practicality of them. That's the biggest draw why a lot of people seek these cars out and prefer them over even other Porsche models, 911s, even Caymans. They are, even though they're relatively good value, even compared to what Porsche is currently producing, but also what other manufacturers produce, they still are at the top of the tree in terms of handling, performance, and overall usability. But if you do have any questions about Boxsters in particular, please don't hesitate to comment below. Please do like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.